The charred scrap was still warm between his thumb and forefinger. On the iPad, his daughter-in-law, Ashley, laughed as the last of the hand-stitched quilt collapsed into ash. Richard Caldwell did not blink. His jaw was stone, his eyes fixed on nothing but the invisible weight of 30 years. The video title read, "Destroying My Ugly In-Law Gift." The view counter ticked past 18 million.
She burned it on purpose. Mary's quilt. 30 years of her hands gone for likes.
He had not spoken a single word since the video ended. The silence in the dark room was absolute. One comment scrolled by, "Lol, the old bag would have wanted it to be useful for once."
How do you hurt someone who has already taken the only thing that mattered?
Richard Caldwell was not a man who would let this pass. But the world had no idea who he really was. 3 years earlier, the quilt had been whole, still warm from Mary Caldwell's hands.
This one is for David's future. Someday he'll wrap his own children in it.
Richard had stood in the doorway watching her stitch. He knew then that the quilt held more than fabric. A year later, Mary was gone. The quilt became a reliquary of every afternoon she had ever sat in the window, sewing. 6 months after the funeral, Richard brought the quilt to his son David and his wife, Ashley.
Your mother made this for your family. She started it long before she ever met Ashley. Take care of it.
Of course, Richard. It's beautiful. We'll find the perfect spot for it.
The pause before beautiful lasted half a heartbeat too long. Ashley's fingers dug into the fabric like it was a chore.
Thanks, Dad. We'll keep it safe, I promise.
Richard believed him. He left the quilt in their care, never imagining it would become fuel for a public spectacle. The weeks after the handover passed in a muted blur for Richard Caldwell. His days had become a quiet rhythm of solitude and old photographs.
I should call David. The house hasn't felt this empty since Mary first got sick.
Across town, Ashley Caldwell's home studio hummed with a different kind of emptiness. Ring lights burned cold white, and her phone glowed with analytics.
You guys, the algorithm loves destruction. A little fire, a little drama. That's how you break 1 million views overnight.
Her followers clamored for a new decluttering series. Sponsors sent messages with dollar signs. The pile of ugly in-law gifts grew in a corner she never showed on camera. On a Thursday evening, Richard's phone buzzed. David's name illuminated the darkening kitchen.
Hey, Dad. Just checking in. Listen, Ashley's filming a big decluttering video tomorrow. She's been planning it for weeks, should get a ton of views.
Decluttering? She's not throwing away anything. I don't know anything with history, is she?
Relax. It's just old stuff collecting dust. You know how she is. It's all for the channel. Gotta keep it entertaining.
Richard hung up, a faint chill settling at the base of his spine. He didn't connect it to the quilt. Not yet, but the quiet in the kitchen felt heavier than before. The next morning, a push notification lit his phone screen. Ashley Caldwell just uploaded a new video. He tapped it without thought, his coffee already cold. He sank into his living room chair and propped up his iPad. The video loaded in sharp clarity. Ashley, backlit by a fire pit, holding a bundle of fabric he recognized instantly. Her voice rang out, performative. "Welcome back. Today we're getting rid of some truly hideous hand-me-downs." She held the quilt up for the camera, grinning. Richard watched without blinking as his wife's 30-year labor was tossed into a metal pit. The flames caught fast, and Ashley laughed.
She planned this. She knew exactly what she was burning. She did it for the views.
The video ended. The view counter was past 3 million. Comments flooded the section below, most of them cheering. One comment sat at the top. "You're a legend, Ash. That dusty quilt was an eyesore. Burn it all."
They have no idea what they destroyed. No idea what she took from me.
He set the iPad down with the care of a man handling a live grenade. His grief had calcified into something cold and unyielding.
There are things I built before any of these people had a following. Systems that can make a channel vanish overnight.
Richard picked up his phone and dialed. The number belonged to a man he trusted with corporate secrets. Gregory Hawk answered immediately.
Gregory, it's Richard. I need your help. Something happened on the platform that requires your direct attention.
Richard, it's been too long. But you sound. What's going on?
Ashley burned Mary's quilt in a video. She laughed while it burned. 18 million people have watched it.
The quilt? Mary's quilt? The one she spent 30 years stitching? Are you telling me she did it on purpose?
I'm not calling as a father-in-law. I'm calling as the head of trust and safety. This was a public violation.
We have morality clauses. If she broke her contract or community standards, we can demonetize immediately and review everything.
Gather what you need. I want accountability. Quiet, precise, and final. No public circus. No warning.
Give me 24 hours, I'll pull her file. Richard, I'm so sorry. For Mary. For all of it.
Richard ended the call. The first stone had been thrown, but the outcome was still unknown. While Richard waited for Gregory's call, Ashley Caldwell was hosting a celebration at her home.
3 million views in 6 hours, guys. The algorithm ate it up. Burning that quilt was the best creative decision ever.
Ash, seriously, that quilt. My mom made it. It wasn't just clutter, it had sentimental value.
Sentimental? David, it was musty and outdated. Your dad never visits anyway. He gave it to us. We can do what we want.
David looked at his wife, the influencer mask fixed perfectly in place, and for the first time he felt like a stranger in his own home.
She called it musty. That was the last thing Mom ever made. Every stitch was for us, and Ashley just laughed.
That night, Gregory Hawk called Richard with a carefully worded update.
The video is damaging, but under current platform standards, it doesn't qualify as harassment. She can argue it's protected expression.
Then enforce the morality clause. Public distaste, intentional cruelty, breach of contract. You know the terms.
I need proof she knew the quilt's meaning and still chose to destroy it. Without that, it's just a tasteless video.
By morning, the video had been picked up by a sensationalist news blog. Headlines screamed, "Influencer burns family heirloom. Millions cheer." The comments sections fractured. Half the audience called Ashley a hero for decluttering. The other half called her a monster. His own name stayed out of it for now. But a new message surfaced in his inbox, raw and unpolished. The attached image was a screenshot. The quilt belonged to his dead wife, and it's time to replace the old with the new.
Someone on the inside sent this. Someone who heard her say it before she ever lit the match.
The sender's name was hidden, but a second message followed. "Meet me in person. I have more."
If these messages are authentic, I could crush her career within hours, but I need to know who sent them.
He studied the screenshot again, the timestamp, the avatar, the casual cruelty of her words.
Gregory said he needed evidence. Well, here it is, straight from the snake's mouth.
He replied to the anonymous sender with 3 words, "Where and when." Then he waited. The meeting was set for a quiet corner of a park cafe, its walls lined with old books left by patrons. Richard sat alone, waiting. A young woman approached, curly dark hair pulled back, her face pale with anxiety. She clutched a small USB drive.
Mr. Caldwell? I'm Linda. I work for Ashley. I shouldn't be here, but after the video, I couldn't stay silent.
You sent the screenshot? Why? What did you hear that made you come forward?
She bragged about it. Said the quilt was old lady garbage. She knew exactly whose it was. She wanted the drama.
She thrust the USB drive across the table as if it burned her fingers. Richard took it without a word. He plugged it into his tablet and scanned file after file, direct messages, time-stamped, laced with venom. One stood out. I know it was his dead wife's. That's the point. Watch this old man crumble.
She planned this. It was never about decluttering. It was a public execution of Mary's memory.
Richard closed the tablet. The proof was ironclad. but the grief was fresh and raw. Linda looked at him, her eyes pleading. Richard drove straight to Gregory's office, the USB drive heavy in his coat pocket. He didn't call ahead. He didn't need to.
You found something? I can see it. What do you have, Richard?
Everything you asked for. Direct messages from before the video. She called it old lady garbage. She wanted to humiliate Mary's memory.
This changes everything. Morality clause, intentional infliction of emotional distress. She's breached every standard we have. But Richard, if we act, it's scorched earth. David will be caught in the middle.
He's right. If I do this, my son might never forgive me. Ashley will twist the knife. Is Mary's memory worth losing my only child?
His hand drifted to his wallet, where an old photo of Mary was tucked behind his driver's license. Her smile, the sewing room, the afternoon light.
She didn't just burn fabric, Gregory. She burned 30 years of love. She burned Mary. Proceed.
I'll trigger the morality clause review immediately. The demonetization will hit within 24 hours. I'll also forward these to our legal team for the civil suit.
The order was given. No fanfare, no raised voice, just two men in a glass room, deciding the fate of a career built on cruelty. But the real battle with Ashley, with the public, and inside his own family was only beginning. At 3:47 a.m., Ashley Caldwell's phone erupted with a notification from the parent platform. Her channel had been demonetized.
What the? Morality clause violation? This has to be a mistake. I'm one of their biggest creators.
She tried every affiliate link, every promo code, all redirected to a single message. This content creator is currently under review.
Someone is sabotaging me. A rival. A hater. They'll regret this. I'll turn it all around. Just wait.
Within an hour, she had her ring light on and the camera rolling, tears perfectly timed for maximum engagement.
Guys, I'm being targeted. My channel was demonetized overnight for no reason. They're trying to cancel me over a silly decluttering video.
Richard Caldwell watched the new video on his iPad, the charred scraps still on the table beside him. His expression did not change.
I'm just a content creator trying to make people laugh. Is that a crime now? Please, if you support me, share this. Fight back.
Fight back? She has no idea the war hasn't even started. That video was just the first consequence.
The views on her crying video climbed fast. Sympathy poured in. But in a high-rise office, Gregory was already filing the civil suit. By morning, 3 luxury sponsors had issued termination letters. One cited the morality clause verbatim.
The dominoes are falling. Her brand is bleeding out, and she still thinks it's a rival prank.
Then his phone buzzed. David. The name he'd been dreading.
Dad, what's happening? Ashley's losing deals. Her network dropped her. It's just an old quilt. Can't you talk to someone?
It isn't just an old quilt, David. Come home. I need to show you something.
An hour later, David walked through the front door, still in last night's rumpled shirt. Richard led him to the kitchen table. On the tablet, Richard pulled up the USB file. The anonymous DMs filled the screen. "Read them," he said. David's finger traced the words. "I know it was his dead wife's. Watch this old man crumble."
Why would she? Dad, she told me it was just an ugly blanket. She laughed at me when I said it mattered.
Richard didn't answer. He placed the charred scrap of quilt beside the tablet. David stared at it, his breath catching. David drove home in silence, the evidence burning a hole in his pocket. He found Ashley in the kitchen, still scrolling through angry comments on her phone.
We need to talk. I saw the messages. You knew it was Mom's quilt, and you burned it anyway.
What? No. Those are fake. Someone's trying to tear us apart.
David held up his phone, the DM thread visible. Her charade cracked.
You went through my private messages? You don't trust me? I did everything for this channel for us.
David didn't raise his voice. He turned and walked out, leaving her standing alone in the kitchen. He didn't go home. He spent the night in his car, engine off, staring at the dashboard. At dawn, Richard's phone buzzed.
Dad, I'm at a hotel. I need space. But whatever you're doing, finish it. She destroyed something irreplaceable.
Richard closed his eyes. The final barrier had been removed. The lawsuit would go public. No more holding back. Mary's memory would have its justice. At precisely 9:42 a.m., the civil suit Caldwell versus Caldwell was docketed in the county courthouse. Gregory Hawk stood beside Richard in the marble hallway, phone in hand.
It's official. The complaint cites intentional destruction, public humiliation, and breach of contract. The statement is ready.
Send it. No more delays. Mary's name deserves the light.
The legal complaint leaked to the press within an hour, but Richard's team had anticipated the move and fed the narrative precisely. The released statement was unflinching. Mr. Caldwell regrets the necessity of legal action, but will not allow the memory of his late wife to be commodified and destroyed for entertainment. Ashley's attorney fired back, calling the DMs fabricated lies, but the court filing included timestamps, device IDs, and server logs. Quoted directly from the complaint, in a message dated 2 weeks prior, the defendant wrote, "I know it was his dead wife's, that's the point. Watch this old man crumble." The public devoured the details. Trending hashtags inverted. Influencer allies began to distance themselves.
She thought the internet would forget, but the internet never forgets cruelty when it's spelled out in a court document.
That evening, Ashley's follower count plummeted. The case was public, and the court of public opinion had already issued its verdict. A settlement offer arrived, a quiet apology, and a modest sum in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement. Richard left it unsigned.
Richard, this could end things cleanly. No more public spectacle.
Clean? There's nothing clean about what she did. I won't take her money.
The case moved to a hearing. In the sterile courtroom, the charred scrap of the quilt was placed on the evidence table. A textile historian took the stand. Her voice was steady. This fragment contains over 3,000 hand stitches per square foot. Irreplaceable artistry lost forever. Ashley's lawyer rose, arguing the quilt had been given as a gift, and its destruction was within the owner's rights. But Richard's team countered with a doctrine of intentional destruction of sentimental property with malice, citing the DMs as proof. The judge studied the charred fabric under the forensics light, then issued a quiet, firm ruling. The court finds the defendant's actions egregious. Damages are awarded in the amount of the quilt's appraised artistic value, plus punitive damages for emotional distress.
I won, but I feel emptier than I did holding that scrap in the dark.
As the courtroom emptied, Richard pulled his attorney aside. His voice was quiet but absolute.
Donate everything, every cent of the settlement. I don't want it touching my account.
Within the hour, a wire transfer, 7 figures landed in the account of the Quilts of Valor Foundation and a local sewing guild. The donation was anonymous at first, but a financial journalist traced the source. The story broke by evening. The nonprofits were overwhelmed. The quilting guild director called it a miracle. Richard refused all interviews. Instead, he released one final statement through his attorney. Mary's hands stitched love into every square. She would want that love to continue. Ashley Caldwell's verified badge disappeared the next morning. Her remaining sponsors cut ties with finality. She had built an empire on the ashes of a quilt. Now, with one court ruling, it had all crumbled.
I never wanted her money. I wanted the world to know that Mary's love wasn't garbage.
And so, without a single raised voice, the quiet old man had spoken. The channel she used was never just a platform. It was his. David Caldwell sat in a sterile hotel room, the television muted on the news. His father's donation had made every headline.
He didn't keep a cent. The whole settlement just gone to strangers who sew. That's more like Dad than any courtroom victory.
Within the hour, he was in his car, driving toward the one address that still felt like home. Richard was on the back porch, a single chair facing the overgrown garden. He didn't turn when the door creaked.
Dad, I saw what you did. All that money for Mom. She would have loved that.
She does.
They sat in silence, the space between them filled with everything they had lost and everything they had salvaged. David didn't return to Ashley. He found a therapist, then a small apartment. One afternoon, he walked into the quilting guild the donation had saved. The room smelled of fresh fabric and old memories. David's hands were clumsy, but no one criticized. Across the room, a small plaque read, "In memory of Mary Caldwell, whose stitches hold us together." Richard never spoke publicly about Ashley again. 6 months had passed. The Quilting Guild's memorial exhibition was in full bloom, with quilts of every color adorning the walls, but one hung in the place of honor. It was an exact replica of Mary Caldwell's pattern, stitched by volunteers who had never met her. The stitches were indistinguishable from the original.
She would have been so proud, seeing her pattern in so many new hands, carrying forward what she thought was lost.
Richard and David stood before the quilt, shoulders barely touching. Neither spoke for a long moment. A small brass plaque beneath read, "In memory of Mary Caldwell, who stitched love." Richard reached out and let his fingers brush the fabric. The stitches were precise, each one a tiny monument to patience. A local reporter approached, notepad in hand, but David stepped in front of his father.
No comment. Please respect our privacy.
The reporter nodded and melted back into the crowd. Richard and David turned toward the exit. They walked out together, two silhouettes against the golden evening light. The weight of the past had not lifted, but they carried it now as shared, not as a wound. Later that afternoon, Richard drove to the cemetery alone, the charred scrap still in his pocket. He knelt by Mary's headstone, the grass still damp from an earlier spring shower.
"I kept a piece of it, Mary. The last square you touched before you couldn't stitch anymore."
From his coat, he withdrew a small envelope containing a square of the original quilt, unburned and intact. He pressed it against the granite, and the wind lifted a corner, as if she were reaching back. For a long moment, he just held the fabric against the stone, his fingers tracing her name. Then, so softly the breeze almost carried it away, he spoke.
"I made sure your stitches keep holding people together, love."
The wind stilled. A single bird called from the oak above. The fabric stayed flat. The screen faded to black. A single line of white text appeared, in memory of the ones who sewed us together. The quilting workshop buzzed with gentle concentration. Women of every age bent over quilting frames, their hands moving in quiet rhythm. The Mary Caldwell Memorial quilt hung on the wall, a centerpiece of color and memory. Needles dipped and rose, each stitch a small act of preservation. In the corner, a grandmother taught a teenager how to quilt, the old passing to the new. A small plaque caught the light. "In memory of Mary Caldwell, who stitched love." The camera drifted across the room, catching laughter and quiet focus. It settled on a small hand, a child's palm pressed flat against the memorial quilt. The fabric held, sturdy and warm. The stitches did not give. The screen slowly dimmed, leaving only the quiet hum of sewing machines. The charred scrap of Mary Caldwell's quilt now rested in a small shadow box on the mantel. Beside it, a faded photograph of her smiling in the afternoon light of her sewing room. The camera slowly zoomed in, the wooden frame of the box filling the shot. Then past the frame, into the blackened floral fabric, its stitches still holding. The woven threads, though burned, still traced the pattern of a lifetime's devotion. Mary's eyes in the photo seemed to watch, eternal and unwavering. The light in the room softened, drawing shadows across the mantelpiece. The scrap became a silhouette, the charring now just texture in the dark. The screen dimmed further, until only the afterimage of the fabric remained. Then, a slow fade to complete black. The morning sun crept through the curtains, finding the shadow box on the mantel. The house was still, but not empty. A presence lingered in the quiet. Beside the shadow box, A fresh cup of tea steamed gently, untouched. Richard stood in the doorway, his silhouette dark against the hall light. He didn't enter. He simply watched the light move across Mary's photograph. A small, private smile touched his lips, barely perceptible, entirely real. Then he turned, pulling the door gently closed behind him. The room slipped back into stillness, the shadow box now in half light. The charred scrap remained, a silent testament to love that outlasted flame. The screen dimmed, and the last light faded with it. The charred scrap never left the shadow box. The story, however, had only begun to spread. Every morning, the sun found it. Every evening, Richard gave it a glance before the light left the windows. Somewhere far from the cameras, a quilting frame held a fresh blanket, still warm from the sewer's lap. A woman hummed while she worked, her needle glinting in the light, her foot gently pressing the pedal. The pattern was familiar, an heirloom pattern, passed down by a woman she had never met. The quilt Mary started 3 decades ago was not gone. It had become 1,000 new quilts. In a sunlit sewing room, a child pressed her hand against a quilt square, tracing the stitches with awe. Stitch by stitch, mile by mile, her love had outlasted the shame that tried to destroy it. The screen lights dimmed for the last time. But the story you just heard never really ended. Because every time a needle goes through fabric, Mary Caldwell's hands are there. Thank you.